Hi everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you all for joining. Great numbers so far for a potentially slightly technical discussion, but great to see that you're all very game for it. And definitely a few familiar friends popping up in the chat there already. Plan is to give it a few minutes here just for any extra attendees just to drip in a little bit. Some of you, of course, know me already, but just for the benefit of anybody who doesn't, my name is Fionn Finegan. I'm the COO of TutorCruncher, and I kind of come at it from the more kind of sales side, the less technical side. So my understanding of everything we're going to be talking about today, which I'll introduce in more detail in a minute, comes from that perspective as someone who's maybe a bit less technical. So you can have a degree of faith in that, hopefully. Just before we kick off properly, we have a few members of the team on the call here today. So we've got Mahi and Rashi, who again, a lot of you will know from as your dedicated account managers. They'll be kind of manning the chat and just making sure that people know what's going on in there. And Henry will be kind of joining me a bit later on for the Q&A. I'll give you the structure of the call now in a few minutes here, just when we kick off. But Mahi, Rashi, do you guys want to introduce yourself? Maybe you want to kick us off there, Mahi, just with yeah, a brief kind of introduction to you.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I've seen a lot of familiar names here, so I'm sure I've spoken to a lot of you already, as probably Rashi has as well. So thank you all for joining. It's probably the first time that both me and Rashi have been on a webinar that we've done. But it looks like we've got a really good turnout so far, hoping for more people to come on. So yeah, it's looking forward to a really good session with everyone, even learning a few bits myself too, so should be good.
Fantastic. You happy to give us something of the same, Rashi?
Yeah, I think Mahi said everything, but yeah, it's so good to be here and see everyone join in. I'm really excited for the session as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Yeah, very exciting stuff. For the benefit of that question in the chat, it is being recorded. And yeah, we'll be sharing this immediately afterwards, and I think the plan is to roll this into some of our documentation as well, so it's nice and easily accessible to everybody afterwards and for a fair bit into the future. Yeah, I hope everybody gets something out of it. All right, I probably will be throwing a lot of information at people, so I'm sure it will stand to you if you played around with this stuff in the past, but no requirement, obviously. Yeah, we'll just give it another 60 seconds maybe, and I'll tee us up for a more general introduction. For the sake of just kind of the structure of the call, I guess, or the agenda, not quite sure how long this introductory bit is going to take. Hopefully we can get it done in less than 30 minutes, but I'm basically going to just kind of introduce the concept of what we're talking about, go through the early stages of setting up a new Zap, they call it on Zapier or Zapier, and then I'm going to go through some examples of ones that we've done in the past, and then yeah, by the time we get to the end of that, so maybe 30 minutes, and I encourage people to use the chat as much as possible. For those not familiar with Meets, it's just down in the bottom right hand corner. There's a little kind of chat icon, a little speech bubble, and you can just write in there any questions as they occur to you. We're going to come back then after I do a kind of a general presentation, and Henry's going to join me for a bit more of a Q&A based on what people have written in. Yeah, okay. Well, so we are 5 minutes in now. I think it's probably time to kick off. So, as you will have all seen, the topic for today is Zapier, whatever you know it as. But in order to introduce that, I want to first introduce the idea of an API. So an API is basically when you've got software products like TutorCruncher, and any other software product on the web, they use what's called an API as the system by which they interface with each other. So how those software products talk to each other, they talk to each other via an API. And that's great, and it's very flexible, and you can do really clever stuff with that. In terms of examples, might be when something happens inside one software product, that you might want to use that as a trigger to make something happen somewhere else. It can be really cool and helpful, but the downside of it is that it requires a software developer to use it properly, and it goes beyond the scope of me and many of our customers. It's not many people's specialty. So the most popular alternative, both kind of on the internet in general and especially in TutorCruncher, is a service called Zapier or Zapier. And what I'm just going to call it Zapier. What they do is they act as an interface between the APIs of different software products. So they're kind of middleman, and all the information from different software products goes to Zapier. It can be tweaked, and the dials and things can be fiddled inside there. And the benefit of doing it that way is that you don't need to be a developer to use Zapier. The interface is much more simple, comparatively speaking, and when it works and it goes well, and when you have an understanding going into it, you can do really cool stuff, and it doesn't require the level of kind of upfront knowledge or investment that you would if you had to work straight with the API. But it can be a little bit tricky, and it can be a little bit temperamental, and if you don't know some of the context going into it, it becomes a lot more difficult. So it kind of crossed our path recently that some people are having some difficulties with this. So we wanted to make sure that everybody has enough information going into it that they feel well prepared to take this stuff on. Cool. So that's the kind of general introduction. I am going to take bring up a screen share now and just go through an example of setting up a Zap for the first time. So a Zap within Zapier is like, it's one workflow essentially, right? So every Zap will have something that triggers it, and it will take action somewhere else, either on the same software or some other different software product. So I'm inside a Zapier account now in my trial, as you may see. And I'm just going to assume I'm coming in here for the first time, and I'm going to create a new workflow that I want to automate some of my processes and get my TutorCruncher system talking to some other system or to the system itself. So I'm going to create a new one here. And that brings me into this editor. They have a little copilot, which we're not going to use in this case, but feel free, obviously, if you're doing this independently. The first stage in any Zap is called a trigger. And the first example I'm going to use here is where the trigger originates inside TutorCruncher. So where something happens inside TutorCruncher and we want it to have an effect elsewhere. Now, one thing I should clarify is that if you've tried this before, you may have come to this stage and typed in TutorCruncher and not had anything show up, because TutorCruncher is invite only on Zapier. We will send around afterwards, and we'll have a link in our docs to the Zapier invite. So on the Zapier page in our help docs, there is an invite there for Zapier. You follow that link, and that will ask you to sign into Zapier and connect the two. And once you have that, then you have TutorCruncher show up there. So I'm going to add TutorCruncher on to this app. So that's now my trigger event. I'll go back into what the trigger specifically is in a second. In terms of connecting the right account, and Mahi has just put the Zapier invite link into the chat. Thank you, Mahi. In order to connect it to the right account, if we were starting from scratch here and we wanted to connect it to a new one, this is going to ask you to put in an API key. So what to do in that situation? If you go to TutorCruncher here, so I have open in another window, just go now to System and Settings, as is often the first port of call. And you want to go down almost right to the bottom here for the API section. Whenever you set up a new Zap, a rule of thumb is you want to set up a new integration in this API section. So add integration. In this case, I'm going to call it Zap1. I'm going to ignore the webhook base URL for a second, but I'm going to come back to that very briefly. This has created a new integration for my first Zap, and it's given me a private key. The private key here, I copy and I paste into the, when I realize you probably haven't been getting this on the screen share. If I connect a new account, it opens a new window and it asks me to paste in the API key, and I paste it in there. So I take it from where I've copied it inside TutorCruncher after creating the new integration and add it in there. Now, in order to get to the next stage here, I have to choose an event. The event is, again, the thing within TutorCruncher that triggers what we want to happen. So in this case, we want new action. There's only one in TutorCruncher. Other apps will have multiple. For us, it's very simple. There's only one. It's new action. And we have to parse that a little bit in a second, but we'll get to that shortly. So I'm going to select an account that I have connected already. There we are. And now this is the webhook URL. So I said we'd come back to that in a second. Zapier needs to give you a link where TutorCruncher knows to send the information to, and that's called a webhook URL. So you copy this here, you go back to the Zap that you've just created. So I'm going to copy this now, go to Zap1, edit it, and just paste in the webhook URL into where it says webhook base URL, and press save. And now the two systems recognize each other and they're talking to each other. So that's one important step down. Now you'll see we've gone to test. So anytime you want to build a Zap inside Zapier, it needs data to use as an example. And the way it gets that data is, so TutorCruncher is sending information to this URL, to Zapier, whenever this trigger event, in this case, new action, so any action or activity that takes place inside TutorCruncher is gonna trigger that. And when they say we're listening here, they're listening for any new information that's come from that URL. So if I went back into my account here and I, let's say, removed a student from a job or completed a lesson, that would all trigger new information to come through. So you see the action that I just took on my account, removed SR, which is a student, a service recipient from a service, that has pulled through information. So that's the first step of any Zap where TutorCruncher is the thing that originates it. On all Zaps where TutorCruncher is the originator, the trigger, the originator of the action, and this follows from the fact that we only have one event, you have to add another stage so that a next step, which will be common to all of these apps, is a filter. So filter by Zapier, whenever I come to a next step here, it's going to suggest to me I can go to different software products to do something in Gmail or HubSpot, and we'll come to those. But the next step in all of these will always be a filter. And that filter will only continue if, and what we want to do here is, because TutorCruncher is sending information for every action in TutorCruncher, so a ton of information, and we want to filter it down to only the right piece of information that we're listening for. In this case, there's always a ton of information that we send here. So I'd encourage you to use the search bar here if you're filtering this stuff out. So we want to only continue if. I'm choosing the field, and the field in this case is action. And you can see from the test that I did, the action that we received was removed SOR from service, removed service recipient from service, or student in system speak. So I only want that as the action, and we want text exactly matches. And here we type in the name of the action that we're listening for. So in our case, the action was removed SOR from service, in which case I would type in just removed _s or _from _service. And that filter is going to filter out everything that is not that particular action. So you'll see examples later on when I specify that I only want these things to happen when I create a client, or when I edit a field on a particular user. So that's a kind of framework for setting up a Zap where TutorCruncher is the trigger. To go on past this, I have a couple of working examples that we've set up in advance. The first one that I'm going to show you here is one that's been set up to connect to Mailchimp. So Mailchimp, for those of you who don't know, is an email service. People will use it sometimes for drip feed email campaigns or newsletters that go a little bit beyond the scope of what TutorCruncher can do just in broadcasts. So if I wanted to connect TutorCruncher to Mailchimp, maybe I want to set it up so that whenever a new client gets created inside TutorCruncher by the inquiry form or manual creation or anything else, then we want their information to be automatically sent across to Mailchimp so that they get added onto a list of people who are going to get the newsletter, maybe. So in which case, I start off doing what we've already done so far. I'm going to edit this so you can see more information about it. So I connected TutorCruncher, like we saw. Trigger event was action, like it always will be. These tests are all the new actions that have taken place that are all getting sent to this webhook URL that we saw earlier. The filter I've applied in this case, I've said action only continue if the action text exactly matches and then it's created a client, because I only want this to fire when a new client gets created. So that's filtering out everything else, and it's now narrowed it down to only those situations where we're creating new clients. And then very simply, the next step, I've connected my external app Mailchimp, and you'll see when you add a new stage like this, if you remember, it shows up all the list of the different apps that you could use, Mailchimp being one example. And that will guide you through. It can be a login, or you have to share API information, similar to what we did with TutorCruncher earlier. It's going to vary a little bit depending on what software product you're looking at. With all the other softwares that you want to use, they're going to have an action event. So we've already decided we're filtering what we're listening for. So we're sending information about new clients to Mailchimp, and the action event is what do we do with it? There's lots of options, and most providers have lots of options for this kind of stuff. In our case, what I thought was most interesting was add or update subscriber. So I've said the action event is going to be they have the client information, we want to add or update a subscriber, and then we go to a configuration stage. So this is where we match up the information that we're giving Mailchimp with the information that Mailchimp wants. There's often lots of fields on these things. The ones to pay particular attention to are the ones with the little red asterisks. They are mandatory, and this Zap will fail if those don't have some answer in them. Sometimes, as in the case of this subscriber email field, I've mapped this to information I got at a prior stage. So when that new action originated inside TutorCruncher, I looked for the email address, which in this case didn't exist. I don't have Joanna Lumley's email address, much to my chagrin. And that's what loads in that data. Other times, like with this audience field up here, I'm not using information that I get from TutorCruncher. I'm just assuming a general principle, which is we have one audience created inside Mailchimp called TutorCruncher contacts, and I'm sending people into that. Similarly, I'm treating them as status subscribed regardless, because they've just been created in TutorCruncher, and that's probably appropriate. And then other things here are optional, first name, last name, and then anything else you want to add. Finally, you can do a test. So that will take the example information that we've been using, the data that we've been using so far for all those created clients, and it will create them in Mailchimp as subscribers. So that's the general principle. And it's a fairly simple example of a kind of Zap that you might set up. To show you another example of a very similar setup, but one also that gets requested, is, say, HubSpot. So again, the structure here is just like we just saw with Mailchimp. In this case, in HubSpot, again, you will have a list of actions that you can use as the trigger for what's going to happen inside HubSpot. Sorry, have I jumped around there? Have I? Yeah, hold on. Let me get you back here. Yeah, so actually this is an example of doing it slightly differently, which maybe I should show you a bit better first. So we've spoken so far about situations in which TutorCruncher is the trigger for a Zap, the thing which originates the action. This Calendly setup is the opposite way around. So the use case that I have for this one is, and this has come up with a lot of clients, is that they want to have a Calendly link on their website. Their customer goes on, books a meeting slot, and then they want that person to be created inside TutorCruncher at the same time that they book. So now this is different because the origination comes from another service and we're creating them inside TutorCruncher. So I've gone into Calendly and I'll edit this so we can see it in more detail. So I've gone in here. When I created my first step here, I chose Calendly as the thing that was going to trigger it. So you see app is Calendly. The trigger event, they had lots for me to choose from, or a few at least. I've chosen invitee created, which is what they call the trigger event when someone books with you via Calendly. I've connected my account. And then it asks you to specify what event type. If you're familiar with Calendly, you set event types for certain kinds of bookings. So I've told it what to listen for in that sense. Again, just like happened when TutorCruncher was the originator, it's given me records, example data to work off. So Jane Seymour here has booked with me through Calendly, and this is submitting her details to me for me to use as a text, as an example to play around with my Zap. Now, this is an interesting example of it originating from outside TutorCruncher because I had to do some formatting on this. So when Calendly collects information from users on their booking form, it just has one field for the name of the invitee, of the person who booked. TutorCruncher doesn't. It has two fields, and we had to marry that up somehow. So when I added my new step, in the same way as you saw before, rather than click on filter, which we've used in the inbuilt tools before, I've clicked on formatter. And the way I've set that up in here, the action event I've set is text, so we're looking to find some text. The configuration that I've done on it is I want to split the text, which is one of the available actions that you can take, the formatting actions that you can take on the information you're putting into it. An example of the input data is the Calendly invitee name field here. So I browse this list and find the invitee name that I want to split, and then they have options here for me to use. A separator is the thing that's going to determine whether they separate it into two fields, and the segment index is, and this information, I encourage you to just use the little information pop-up options to explain to you, because I wouldn't have known this either. So I would go on and explain the field, and it explains to you there on Zapier that it tells you what information it returns. So us having set this up, the output for this formatter is it takes one name and it splits them into 2 fields, just like we need for TutorCruncher. And then all that we have left to do now is create a client inside TutorCruncher. So again, like you saw in the other apps, when you create an action, when you want TutorCruncher to take an action as opposed to being a trigger, you can choose from an action event here. So we'll have a list of action events. In our case, at the moment, I've selected create client because that's the first port of call. The configuration, just like we did before, we were mapping fields onto information fields that they needed inside Mailchimp. And now we do something similar with TutorCruncher. So I've said that I want this person to be created as a prospect in my sales pipeline. And then I've added information like their name and their email address. And again, I can test this to use that data and try to put it into a practical example of creating a client with those details. And similarly, I wanted to take another action following that because I also collected information about the student on the Calendly page. And I mapped fields similarly to what I'd done in the previous step. When creating a student, you need the client ID, but I had that from step 3 here. So when I'm mapping those information fields, you see it gives me the various steps, and then I can select a step and choose the information that I get from that step when taking the action on the next. So I populated that student with, I have a field for the student's first name on the Calendly booking page, and any other fields that I want to create there. So again, I press test, and this creates the students inside TutorCruncher, and it kind of proves the concept. So those are a few examples of both it originating inside TutorCruncher and outside TutorCruncher. If I want to show you an example here, we'll do another quick one maybe of something originating inside TutorCruncher, which is also one of our more frequently requested ones. So the use case here is that we wanted to showcase something where an email is sent to a user based on something happening in TutorCruncher. And the action that we've chosen in this case, so you'll remember, we connected TutorCruncher as the app that is going to be the trigger. We set a filter, and in this case, the filter we were looking for is any action which matches the name marked invoices paid. So this is the use case here is some admins want to get an email notification when an invoice is paid. And TutorCruncher doesn't, we don't have an option for that within our system. There's no setting that you can turn on that would do that automatically inside TutorCruncher. So maybe you want to turn to Zapier to solve that problem for you. So we've put our filter on here for action marked invoices paid, and the text matches that. And all we've done with that is send it to Gmail, which connects with Zapier just like all the other apps we've seen. And we've put the input data that we got from our first step here on TutorCruncher. And we've populated a subject line and a body with details about the invoice, the ID and the date paid, the client's name, first name and last name. And that's going to send an email to, in this case, sam+accounts@tutorcruncher.com to say that a new invoice has been paid. So another more simple example. One other, if we have the time here, I'll show you a couple more maybe. I won't spend as much time on them anymore. I appreciate I'm probably giving you a lot of information here. Another example is TutorCruncher updating TutorCruncher. So we've spoken a lot about connecting TutorCruncher to other software products or other software products to TutorCruncher based on communication between the two. With this one, we're actually just getting TutorCruncher to talk to TutorCruncher. But it's, again, in a way that TutorCruncher doesn't natively support, doesn't support via the settings on the app. So the specific use case that I have for this one is, again, standard. We connect to TutorCruncher. The event is always new action. The filtering is going to determine what we're listing for here. And what we're listing for in this case, again, is created a client. So that's the list of actions that we're listing for. And I've made a specification beyond that. What I want to do here is imagine you've got an inquiry form on the website. And maybe also within TutorCruncher, you have certain, if you're familiar with client managers, it's like a special class of admin inside TutorCruncher that you can use to have multiple salespeople assigned to different clients' accounts. Maybe they have their own unique customer pipeline. You could track things like how much their customers have spent with you to maybe work commission or something like that. It's a separate function inside TutorCruncher and quite helpful. Maybe one of my colleagues here could fire in the link to the help article, which describes client managers if you're not familiar with the term. Not super important for this, but basically what I want is that on the inquiry form, let's say we have a field for the client fills out what kind of package they want to be enrolled onto. And when they fill out that field in a particular way, for me, I've said when they select package B, I want to use that information to assign a particular client manager to them. So I'm taking the information from the inquiry form from when a new client gets created. I did my filter for the particular action. I'm doing a second filter now for if the custom fields include the term package B, and then my action is I am updating the client on TutorCruncher, and I am changing the associated. I'll just edit this so you can see it as you would be doing it live. So I have edited the associated admin ID and changed it to a particular value. So that's the admin ID of the particular client manager that I want to assign when a client has selected package B. And it just means that as new clients are coming into your sales pipeline, they can be automatically assigned to particular users. And what you don't have to do is what some people have ended up doing, which is that they have to do manual triage on new list of clients comes in. Someone has to sit there and figure out who they should be assigned to. This way, you don't have to worry about that. If you have a client manager who's Barbara can just come on, filter for her sales pipeline, and then as new clients are created, depending on the answers they've chosen on the inquiry form, they're going to be populated into her pipeline without anyone having to have put them there. So interesting use case. I've also specified as part of this, based on the package that they said they were interested in, I have a field here for what services they're interested in. Imagine that perhaps on the website I've said that package B is for test prep. So I've said that if they fill out package B on there, I automatically populate the custom field that I've created for services interested in to the value of test preparation. So that's kind of TutorCruncher updating itself. One caveat with doing this is that we prefer if it didn't work this way. Unfortunately, our hands are kind of tied on it. When you're getting information about custom fields, Zapier is a little funny about how it communicates that information. So despite us trying to set it up as nice, sensible tables where everything is clear what it refers to, Zapier wants to put out that information for all of the custom fields that you might have set up on a client's profile as one big long string of text. And it can be quite hard to figure out which bit of information you're actually looking for. There are a couple of ways to parse this. If you're working with custom fields, generally the easiest thing to do is to use a drop-down field. The custom field be a drop-down field, which you then use for your Zap, because then I can specify, I can do a text contains search. I can say I'm looking for a particular name of the custom field, and it's me as an admin who decides what that is going to be and how unique it is. And then when I get that big long list of information about custom fields, it's pretty easy to find where did they select package B as the custom field option. Great, it's either in there or it isn't, and if it's in there, we'll pull it and we'll update information about the client based on that. That gets more complicated if it's free text, so the client has written in whatever they want. Technically, you could still do a general text contains search for that, but it is a bit messy and you can't perfectly predict what a client is going to type in, so we'd probably encourage you away from that. Similarly, if you are using a drop-down option, or sorry, a checkbox option, a checkbox so is either true or false, it's either clicked or not clicked. It might be fine if you only use one of them. Not recommended in that situation either, but especially if you have multiple, you could do text contains true, and it's just going to find any checkbox that they've selected, and it's going to say, oh, something's true somewhere, so we're going to continue on with this process regardless. General principle on this stuff: if you can take the custom field information into a drop-down so you can control the text, great, fantastic, go for that. Then you can do the text contains thing like I've done here in my filter, and you're golden. You don't need to think about it anymore. If that's not going to work for the fields that you want to use as your criteria for filtering out new customers, for example, we have an option here that Henry has drawn up. It will be introducing to you two in a moment, where he has inserted a bit of Python. And Python is a development language. You don't need to understand it. I certainly don't understand it. The point being, he has developed some code here which will, based on the machine name of the custom field, and I'll show you how to get that right now. Based on that, he can make sense of all that big long list of information that's being sent through to Zapier from those custom fields. So if you have a particular field and you can tell us the machine name, just let us know that you're trying to do what you're trying to do, and then we should be able to give you the code that makes that work for things like big long text fields or checkboxes. In order to find the machine name for any custom field, just go into your system and your settings and go down to where you set, not that one, where you set up custom fields. And let's say we want something about tutors here. So you see, when I click a custom field, the second option there is machine name. So just send us that and a brief description of what you're trying to do inside Zapier, and we'll give you some code and you can make that work. But that's the general principle anyway. I'm conscious we want to get on to Q&A. I only have one last thing, which I'll just cover briefly, is this Shopify integration. So this is kind of cool, and it's something we had requested a lot. We have, it wasn't really possible up until now, but in advance of this webinar, because we really wanted to get some cool Zapier tools out and show some really interesting use cases. Some changes have been made, again, thanks to Henry, that have allowed you to, probably most of you are familiar with Shopify. People use it as like a shopping cart function on their website. So maybe you have a Squarespace website or a Wix website, and they have plugins and things for these, whereby clients can go on, they can pay money online, and then get some service as a result of that. The difficulty people have had with that in the past is that there was still a manual job to be done. When someone buys something on Spotify or Shopify, I always do that, which might be connected to your website, someone still had to go and turn around and type into TutorCruncher, this person paid me £500 or dollars, and that is credited onto their account. So it's a manual step where you wouldn't ideally want there to be a manual step. So what I've done in this example is, and I should clarify, if you're doing this on Shopify specifically, it won't work on a trial account. Being there and done that, so you do have to pay for Shopify in order even test a Zap with this. The trigger event I've used inside Shopify is called new paid order. I've connected it to the account using, you give it your store name, and then it takes some records for me. So just like we saw before, it's going to give me some records of the information that it has based on me testing it. So in this example, we've got Donald Faison here. Scrubs might remember. So he's filled out an order on Shopify. And then the new feature that TutorCruncher has introduced to our integration with Zapier is the option to find clients by email. So this in your setup here, this is one of those action events, and it's a new one that you wouldn't have seen before if you set up Zapier previously. And the configuration was, again, we just take the customer email from the previous step. We want this to run regardless, because I'm going to show you a path in a moment, whether it returns results or whether it doesn't. And if multiple search results are found, just say return first search result, especially in the case of email. That's just not going to happen because TutorCruncher couldn't facilitate it anyway, but you just need to put something in the box. You give that a test. It tries to find the client, Donald Faison, in TutorCruncher based on their email address, and that's what we're going to use to figure out whether or not we think that person is a current customer of yours or not. It's definitely fallible. They could just be using a different email address, but this is probably the best data that we have to go on. What I've added here now, in my next step, I added a Zapier, what they call a path, and that's split my workflow into two. And on path A, I've specified only continue if that previous step at number 2, the search was found status, is true. And in which case, another one of my actions I've said is create credit request. So this is how you add credit onto someone's account in TutorCruncher. You have to create a credit request and then subsequently mark it as paid as 2 separate actions. So we create a credit request, we map the fields, we take the amount from Shopify, put it in there, we take the client ID that we found at step 2 and put it in there. And then we have some options as to whether we want to actually send the pro forma invoice credit request, same thing. And whether or not we want to do things like automatically mark it as paid. But if we send it and then take payment on it, another action that you can do separately inside TutorCruncher, and again, we pre-fill it with information we have from the prior step, amount and the ID that we get from step 5, and we can choose to send a receipt and stuff forward as well. We'll have to, method, you just have to put something in the box. So I'm assuming debit card here, could be right, could be wrong. And all I've done on path B, which is when that customer didn't already exist inside TutorCruncher, I said the found status was false. And then I've done the same thing, but I created the client first. So the idea is now you've got Shopify set up on your website. Someone buys a package or an offering on there. And if they're an existing client on TutorCruncher, we create a credit request in relation to their account and then mark it as paid, so the balance goes on there. And if they don't already exist in TutorCruncher, then we create them and we create a credit request and we mark it as paid. So now you have a pretty seamless integration. And I should say, and I know our CEO, Tom, would want me to stress, this is functionality that we are absolutely planning on building fully inside TutorCruncher and not just outsourcing to something like Zapier. Not a long-term solution, but we're conscious that this is something that people want, and we don't currently have a date by which we could offer it. So there we are. That is as much as I'm going to say on my little solo bit. I appreciate it, throwing a lot at you already. I imagine there's a few questions popping up into the chat. I'm going to hand over to Henry here briefly, just to introduce himself and correct anything that he thinks could benefit from a bit of further clarification. You happy to jump in there, Henry, are you?
Yeah, hello. Sure, I have talked to a couple of you on emails before, but to many of you, I might be a new face. As a developer, we're mostly only seen by email. So I am Henry, the senior developer at TutorCruncher, if you have not met me before. Mahi's managed to get back to most of the stuff in the chat. I've been helping him out, making sure we get the right stuff back to you guys. There is just one small thing from Rory there. With the preset custom fields, we kind of have already done this. And because obviously all of our clients are extremely different, we can't go and start adding these fields to existing models in the backend, as that will create more problems than solutions. So what we're trying to do is basically make, when we have to integrate these issues with something like Zapier, we're trying to make that easier. Alternatively, the API is just much better directly. Unfortunately, that's not going to be a solution for everybody, but that's the way it is now. And then also for John, you had asked a couple of questions there. For your second case, it's quite complex, so I'm going to suggest you go and email the dev team, which Mahi will hopefully add the link in now. But for your first question, it is possible to, sorry, let me just find it here again. It's possible to check the client's balances through Zapier on the get client endpoint. The only problem you would have with your specific use case is because you're not storing the data in your own system, you're going to end up using a lot of requests, having to check every client against TC every time an appointment ends, and that's going to cost you eventually with Zapier. So in the long run, if it's going to make more sense, it's probably better for you to have your own system. Apart from that, I think we kind of got everything. Oh. I think that's everything from my side, I can really say.
Yeah, sure. And for what it's worth, there's a couple of specific points, and I appreciate Mahi and Rashi have been doing a good job of answering questions as I've been talking there, which is fantastic. Just as I see a couple of specific examples in here, one of the things that I've been very conscious of as I've gotten slightly better at Zapier is it is either the easiest thing in the world or absolutely impossible to make something work in Zapier. The issue that I think a few people in TutorCruncher have had now is that there's no way of knowing which, almost, until you really until you go in and you try to set that kind of stuff up yourself. I know like a lot of you will know one of our guys on sales, Sam. I think he had that when he first tried it out. He tried a particular use case which, just by strange quirkiness and coincidence, was extremely difficult to solve. And I think he got the impression that therefore Zapier is just not a good solution. And I would absolutely understand people coming and arriving at that same conclusion. But I do think until you try something out, there's just no way of knowing. It could be the easiest thing ever, and it might just not work at all. I say that because I see, and also hello Zach, I see your message in there, Zach, about integration with WhatsApp. I did look into this at some stage in the past specifically. I think I had some issue with the endpoints or actions or accounts that you needed maybe on WhatsApp in order to make some of this work, although I can't remember. Mahi absolutely could be coming to this with more background information and context than I have about it, so absolutely defer to him in that case. But with some of that, yeah, I think with a lot of the specific examples, they just kind of have to be tried. And as Henry said, we have the dev team at TutorCruncher contact for if you have any specific issue and you're looking to get around it. I would encourage people not to be disheartened by it, because Zapier is it's something that we can, generally speaking, add a lot of value to our customers via, without usually like huge investment from our side, and it's very it benefits everybody a little bit more generally to have more options available inside Zapier. So to whatever extent we can make life easier there, it's usually toward the top of our list and things we'd like to do. I'm just flicking through the chat here. So Ashley, also hello Ashley, Odell, interested in sending an email to the client manager. Again, I think I'd probably have to try that out. I don't know if that returns information about the client manager. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head, Henry, do you?
Yeah, I gave that endpoint there to Mahi. Basically,
you did. Great,
we get the ID. We get the ID actually of the client manager, so we might need to do some backend for that. I'm not entirely sure we have the email available on that. I just wanted to add about the WhatsApp thing. It looks like Zapier have created a much easier WhatsApp integration, so that you can just 2FA with your own mobile number, and you should be able to start sending WhatsApps from yourself.
That's really exciting. Yeah, my information's probably out of date then.
Yeah.
Cool.
I remember looking at it in the past, and it was quite a lot of hoops to jump through. But if that's possible now, that's quite cool.
That would be great. Yeah, so I guess in response to Ashley's question, maybe the solution and we can jot that down as a note internally for us, but maybe the solution for that would be expanding that search user based on things like ID a little bit more broadly beyond clients, as we did it for that Shopify example that we used a minute ago, was it?
Very sorry if you're asking me there. I thought
it's fine. We have it as an internal note. It's probably better off as a chat we have after this, but good to have a few more avenues to look down through. And apology if I'm answering anything. I'm sure a lot of this stuff has come through separately anyway.
I see Molly Roberts. You're having problems with failures in Zapier itself. We can help you out pretty quickly with that at the dev team. If you can send us screenshots of the error you're getting, I have a feeling we'll know exactly what that is from our changes a couple of months back.
Absolutely, yeah, and as we've said already, any issues like that or error messages that you're getting inside Zapier, always helpful for us to know, actually, because yeah, I think it's easy to get discouraged by it, but either, as Henry said, we have very specific experience with them, or maybe it indicates to us that there's something we could be doing differently. Again, apologies if this got an answer already, just hopping around here a little bit. John Christian Lopez, is it possible to do layered conditions? So I think we kind of had that a bit, didn't we, on which was it? We had like a couple of a multi-stage filter, right?
Yeah, you were using multi-filtering and paths, which I think unfortunately doesn't quite cover John's specific use case, where he needs of packages. We can try and sort them out in the dev team, but I think for something that complex, it's going to require an API.
That was the one that you were responding to earlier. That makes sense.
Yeah. Zach, as for getting blocked from WhatsApp, that'll be up to WhatsApp. That won't be something we can answer you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into it myself after this as well. But if you do hear, Zach, about any of that kind of rate limiting stuff off WhatsApp, and you're happy to share, we'd be very curious to know about it as well, of course. Fantastic. All right. I think, unless there's something I'm missing there in the chat, I think that's probably. Oh, have we seen Sandy's question? How is he? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so for the benefit of the call and the recording here, Sandy at Newman Tuition, I have a question. In your experience, how can Zapier take the most workload off your hands in terms of actions it can do with TutorCruncher? It's a very good question. I had that in mind a little bit with the examples that we ran through so far today. They are also among the most, they are the most frequently requested. Those two things obviously have a lot of overlap, as you can imagine. Are there any other examples that I think could really save people a lot of time? What would be helpful? I mean, there's a lot of website integration stuff that doesn't always, depending on the web builder you use, that's not always perfect through Zapier. Could you remind me, Henry, is there currently functionality for adding labels to clients?
I think there certainly is through the API, but I don't.
It's not on Zapier at the moment. Maybe that's another thing to stick on the list for the near future. But yeah, I think we've mostly.
The only other thing that I can think of that most people miss, can't do just yet in Zapier, is adding people to jobs. You can add people to lessons, but not to a job at the moment.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
sorry for backtracking on your question earlier, Ashley, you will be able to get the email of a client manager through the Get Client endpoint.
Oh, great. Oh, that's very good to hear. I had something there in my head, now it's totally gone. Fantastic. All right. Seems like we have everything mostly dealt with then. Unless we have any last minute questions to be fired in, I think that might be us then, is it? Very welcome. Great to have you. Yeah, and great to have so much interest today. All right. I think that's us then, folks. Thank you all again so much for joining. And yeah, have a great rest of the day and a great weekend. All right. All the best, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.